1 million people, one city, no electricity, no plumbing in the modern sense, no internet, no supply chains spanning continents. And yet, in this city, they had clean water delivered to their doorstep, free food, free entertainment, public baths larger than football stadiums, a skyline of marble temples that made every other city on earth look like a village. This was Rome. Not the Rome of legends and myths, not the Rome of founding brothers and she-wolves, the real Rome, the Rome at its absolute peak, 27 BC to 180 BC, 2 centuries the ancient world called the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome. And in those 200 years, human civilization did something it had never done before and wouldn't do again for over 1,000 years. It built a city for 1 million people and actually made it work. Today, we walk those streets, we enter those buildings, we feel the heat of the bathhouses, hear the thunder of the Circus Maximus, stand beneath a dome that engineers still can't fully explain. This is Rome, at the peak of the Golden Age. History is waiting.
The year is 44 BC. Julius Caesar lies dead on the Senate floor, 23 stab wounds. The republic he tried to save, or destroy, depending on who you asked, is bleeding out with him. What follows is chaos. 13 years of civil war, Rome tearing itself apart. 2 men, Mark Antony and Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, circling each other like wolves until one of them has to go. 31 BC, the Battle of Actium. Antony and Cleopatra flee. Octavian wins. And Rome, exhausted, broken, desperate for order, gets the man who will rebuild it. Octavian takes a new name, Augustus, the revered one. He stands before the Senate in 27 BC and makes a careful performance of restoring the Republic. The Senate keeps its chambers, elections still happen, but everyone in Rome understands the truth. There is one man in charge now. He divided Rome into 14 administrative regions, created the Vigiles, 7,000 men, Rome's first professional fire brigade and police force, rebuilt 82 temples in a single year, not renovated, rebuilt from the ground up. He said it himself, "I found Rome a city of bricks and left it a city of marble." He launched a building program that would run for 2 centuries after his death. He ended the civil wars. For the first time in a generation, Romans didn't live in fear of the next battle, the next purge, the next strongman. By the 2nd century AD, Rome had 1 million inhabitants, a population Europe wouldn't match again until the 19th century London. This is what that city looked like.
Walk into Rome at its peak, and the first thing that hits you is scale. Not the scale of a big town, not the scale of a busy market, the scale of something that has no right to exist in the ancient world. The Forum Romanum. At the heart of Rome, the political, religious, and commercial center of the known world, expanded multiple times by emperors who each needed to leave their mark. A canyon of marble columns, temple facades, and triumphal arches stretching further than the eye can follow. Caesar's Forum. Augustus adds his own. Vespasian adds another. And then in 113 AD, Emperor Trajan completes what will become the largest forum in Roman history. 300 meters long, 2 semicircular markets, 5 stories high, 150 shops, spices, silk, legal services. And rising from the center, a single column of Carrara marble. Trajan's column. 38 meters tall. Spiral around it and you see 2,500 individual figures carved in perfect relief. Legionnaires, barbarians, rivers, battles, a stone record of Roman conquest that has survived intact for 1,900 years. Walk northwest from the forums, and you reach something that should not exist. The Pantheon. Rebuilt by Emperor Hadrian between 118 and 126 AD,
a circular temple with a concrete dome, 43.3 meters in diameter. To this day, the largest unreinforced concrete dome ever built. Modern engineers with modern materials and modern computers have studied it for decades. They still debate exactly how the Romans cast it. At its apex, the oculus, a circular opening 9 meters across, open to the sky. No glass, no cover. When it rains, the water falls through and drains through holes in the marble floor. When the sun moves, a beam of light tracks across the interior like a clock. Stand beneath it, and you stand in a space that has been continuously in use for nearly 2,000 years. Now look up from the monuments. Look at what actually keeps 1 million people alive. 11 major aqueducts, 11 rivers of water flowing day and night from mountain springs up to 90 kilometers away, carried across valleys on arched stone bridges, delivered to every corner of the city. Without a single pump, gravity does all the work. Roman engineers do the math, and they get it right every time. The Aqua Claudia, 69 kilometers from the Anio Valley, arches 27 meters high entering the city. Over 1 million cubic meters of water delivered to Rome every single day. More than 1,000 liters per person, more than modern European cities average today. Feeding 1,352 public fountains, 11 imperial bathhouses, hundreds of private homes, running constantly. The overflow cleans the streets, the sewers flush waste into the Tiber. Rome is not just big, Rome is engineered. And connecting it all to the rest of the world, 29 major roads radiating outward, reaching 372 cities across 3 continents, imperial couriers covering 540 kilometers in 5 days, messages from the frontier reaching Rome in weeks. This is how 70 million people are administered from one city. Now, forget the monuments, forget the emperors. Imagine you are one of Rome's million residents. You wake up in your home. And for 90% of Romans, home is a nightmare. Insulae, apartment buildings, 6, sometimes 7 stories of timber and brick, rising from narrow streets, leaning slightly toward each other overhead, blocking the light. You live on the 4th floor. Your apartment, 1 room, maybe 2, 30 square meters, family of 5. No running water, no kitchen, no heat in winter, except a small charcoal brazier that might kill you with fumes if you sleep with it burning. Every morning you carry your chamber pot down 4 flights of stairs. Every morning you carry your water up 4 flights from the fountain on the corner. Every meal comes from a street stall or a thermopolium, a fast food counter with stone surfaces and sunken clay pots of food kept warm, open from dawn to dusk. The higher your floor, the lower your rent. The lower your floor, the better your life. Fire is the constant terror. Rome burns regularly. Nero's fire in 64 AD destroys 10 of the city's 14 regions, hundreds of thousands homeless overnight. The city rebuilds in brick and stone, but the danger never fully ends. Julius Caesar banned wheeled vehicles from Rome during daylight to ease congestion, so every night the streets fill with iron wheels grinding on stone pavement, carts unloading at warehouse doors, drivers shouting, vendors calling from before dawn. The poet Juvenal writes that you cannot sleep in this city. He isn't complaining, he's reporting. But for Rome's wealthy, perhaps 5% of the population, life is something else entirely. The Domus, a private house built around a central atrium open to the sky, a shallow pool in the floor collecting rainwater, private rooms, a kitchen, a garden courtyard, marble floors, painted frescoes on every wall, mosaic floors of extraordinary precision, space, quiet, privacy. In a city of 1 million, the greatest luxury of all.
Every afternoon around the 6th hour, Rome does something remarkable. It stops, and 1 million people head to the baths. By 400 AD, Rome has between 800 and 900 public bathing facilities. The small neighborhood baths serve local streets, but the great imperial thermae are something else entirely. The baths of Trajan, opened in 109 AD, cover 10 hectares. The baths of Caracalla serve 1,600 bathers simultaneously. Floors of colored marble, walls lined with columns, libraries in both Greek and Latin, gardens, colonnaded walkways. This is not a bathhouse. This is a city within a city. The sequence never changes. The palaestra, open exercise yard, wrestling, weightlifting, ball games. Physical fitness is a civic duty. Then the tepidarium, warm room for your body to adjust. The caldarium, hot room, heated floors and walls, steam rising, a slave scraping the day's grime from your skin with a curved bronze strigil. Then the frigidarium, cold plunge, water so cold it shocks the breath out of you. Beneath your feet, the hypocaust, hot air circulated through hollow tiles under the floor and inside the walls, heating the room evenly without open flame. Modern radiant floor heating operates on the same principle. Cost of entry, 1 quadrans, the smallest coin in circulation. A laborer on minimum wages can afford it. Slaves enter with their masters. A senator and a shopkeeper strip down and share the same pool. This is Rome's genius. Not that it built luxury, that it built luxury at scale and made it available to nearly everyone. But the bathhouses are only half of the equation. Panem et circes, bread and circuses. The satirist Juvenal writes it as criticism. Rome's emperors practice it as policy. Keep the masses fed, keep them entertained. The throne stays secure. The grain dole distributes free wheat to over 200,000 Roman citizens every month. Later emperors add olive oil, wine, and pork. This isn't charity. This is calculated political stability. And then there are the circuses. The Circus Maximus seats 150,000 people. Some estimates say 250,000. 12 chariots thunder around a 600-meter track. 4 factions, blues, greens, reds, whites, and Rome goes insane. Fans don't just prefer a faction, they live for it. They die for it. Riots break out regularly. Winning charioteers earn fortunes that put senators to shame. Diocles, the greatest charioteer in Roman history, 1,462 race wins over 24 years, total earnings by modern estimates around $15 billion.
And there is the Colosseum. Completed in 80 AD, 50,000 seats, 76 numbered entrances, the same system used in modern stadiums, filling or emptying the entire structure in minutes. Every seat with a clear sight line to the arena floor. Opening games, 100 days, 5,000 animals slaughtered, lions, bears, elephants, rhinoceroses, hunted from the edges of the known world and killed for the crowd's amusement. Beneath the arena, the hypogeum, 2 stories of underground tunnels, cages, and hoisting mechanisms, 28 elevators operated by slaves raising animals and fighters through trapdoors. To the crowd above, a lion appears from nowhere, a wall of fire erupts from the sand. Engineering creates illusion. Engineering creates spectacle. Spectacle creates control. This is what Rome understood that no city before it had understood. 1 million people need more than food and shelter. They need to feel part of something. They need collective experience. They need to shout and weep and cheer together. Rome gives them the arena, and in return, Rome stays stable for 200 years.
Then, in 161 AD, something unusual happens. A philosopher becomes emperor. Marcus Aurelius does not want power. He never did. Raised in aristocratic comfort, educated by the finest teachers Rome can find, rhetoric, law, Stoic philosophy, he spends his youth doing what he loves, reading, writing, thinking. His adoptive father, Emperor Antoninus Pius, grooms him for duty. Marcus accepts. When Antoninus dies, Marcus takes the throne, but immediately insists on sharing it with his adoptive brother, Lucius Verus, the first official co-emperorship in Roman history. The empire he inherits is the richest, most powerful, most sophisticated political structure humanity has ever built. Rome is at its territorial peak. The Pantheon stands perfect. The Colosseum fills nightly.
The aqueducts flow without interruption. Marcus should be the final perfect chapter of the Golden Age. Instead, he gets catastrophe. In 1605 AD, Roman troops return from a campaign in the east. They bring something back with them, a disease, almost certainly smallpox, never before seen in the Western world. The historian Cassius Dio records that at the height of the outbreak, 2,000 people die in Rome every single day. The streets fill with bodies faster than the funeral pyres can burn them. The stench of smoke and death hangs over the city for months, then years. Between 5 and 10 million dead across the empire, perhaps 10% of the entire population. Marcus doesn't flee, he stays, he administers. Then, while the plague still burns, the northern frontier breaks. Germanic tribes cross the Danube and invade Italy itself. The first foreign invasion of the Italian peninsula since 390 BC. 5.5 centuries of security shattered. Marcus spends years on the frontier. He recruits gladiators, he recruits slaves, he recruits bandits, because the plague has killed so many soldiers that regular recruitment can no longer replace the dead. And in his tent, on the Danube frontier, in the cold, far from the marble city he rules but never really inhabits, Marcus writes, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking.
These are not the words of a triumphant emperor standing on conquered ground. These are the words of a man watching the world he was born into collapse and choosing every single day to keep going anyway. Marcus Aurelius dies in 180 AD at Vindobona, modern-day Vienna, on the frontier he never left, possibly from the plague itself. His last words to his staff, "Go to the rising sun. I am already setting." His son Commodus inherits the empire. Within years, the cruelty and incompetence of Commodus shattered what his father spent 20 years holding together. The historian Cassius Dio writes, "From a kingdom of gold, we descended to one of rust and iron. The Golden Age is over."
200 years, one city, 1 million people. What Rome built during the Pax Romana doesn't just survive in museums, it survives in every city you've ever lived in. The Pantheon's dome, 43.3 meters, still the largest unreinforced dome on Earth 1,900 years later, inspired every domed building from the US Capitol to St. Peter's Basilica. The Aqueducts system established the principle that clean water is a right, not a privilege. The grain dole is the direct ancestor of every state welfare program in existence today. The numbered entrances of the Colosseum are the same system used in every arena built in the last 100 years. Rome didn't just build a city, Rome built the template. And the lesson Marcus Aurelius left behind, written in a tent on a frozen frontier while the empire crumbled around him: the obstacle is the way. Augustus found Rome a city of bricks. Marcus Aurelius left it to rust, but the marble endured.